Hello everyone, welcome to our lecture for today. With tremendous amount of scientific articles being published every year, it is impossible for us to read each and every one of them. It is a skill to be mastered. And what is that skill? It is the ability to analyze scientific literature critically, which brings us to our topic for today, critical appraisal of scientific literature. Scientific articles should not be accepted at face value, even if it is published in a highly reputable journal, or on the other hand, we know that the authors are pioneers, so we assume that their paper is of low quality. Now, this should not be it. We must always keep an open mind, and only after analyzing the article can we decide whether the article is worth reading or not. In English language, the word critical has several meanings. For example, to be critically ill is to be in a critical condition. Or, it is a critical step to take, which means that it's an important step to take. In research science, the word critical has a different meaning. The terms critical reading or critical thinking, critical assessment, and critical evaluation refers to analysis or examination of what others have written. Now, critical evaluation is the process of validating or devalidating a study based on its merits and demerits. Critical evaluation consists of two steps. Step 1 is critical appraisal. Step 2 is critical reflection. Now, critical appraisal is a systematic process in examining research papers using explicit criteria to assess the validity of data or results being presented. In other words, it is the assessment of the scientific quality of the paper, including the study design, methodology, and the data analysis that has been conducted. As a critical appraiser, we should be asking questions like, is the title relevant to the study conducted? Is the method used appropriate for the defined aims and objectives of the study? Are the statistical tests used appropriate and indicated? In critical appraisal, we want to assess the internal validity of the study. In assessing the internal validity, we want to assess the methodological quality of the study. And this is mostly about the technical issues of research methods and analysis. In contrast, critical reflection looks at the external validity, in which we reflect on the importance and practical relevance of the study. Unlike critical appraisal, it is mostly about the issues related to extensions of the study to a wider population. Thus, the aim of critical reading, critical reviewing, or critical evaluation is to evaluate information derived from a study or report, is to determine the weight to be placed on the evidence of the paper provided, or can the evidence provided be considered. Now, there are many publications available these days that can be used as references in order to facilitate us in doing critical appraisal. And one of such publications is How to Read a Paper, which are now available in several editions. How to read a paper. Number 1, all sections should be read critically. No matter how busy we are, we should not be missing any sections. We may start with section most likely to contain problems, and that would be the study design and the analysis. However, there are no hard and fast rules. This is simply just a guide. Now, there are two methods that can be used in reading a paper. Method A is to first do a speed read. In other words, is to speed read the whole paper to get the general idea of the paper. Following that, we look intently at the objectives, the conclusions, abstract, literature review, the title, methodology and results, and lastly, the discussion. While in method B, we would read first the aims and objectives of the paper, followed by methodology, results, discussion, conclusion, and then we will go back to the beginning of the paper by reading the introduction, title, and lastly the abstract. Now, it does not matter which method that we can use, either method A or method B. It all depends on your preferences. However, what's important is we must know and understand the sections of the paper before we can start to do or conduct critical appraisal. Okay, let us first know about the article. The type of article, and who is the publisher, what about the year of publication and the issue number, and then whether the paper is peer-reviewed or not. Now, this would be the general information about the paper. And as I mentioned earlier, we must know the sections of a paper. You must understand the content of each section. And this would include the abstract or summary of the paper, introduction or review literature. In most papers that are published in journals, the review of literature is usually incorporated within the introduction. Unlike when you are writing a thesis, then the literature review is normally a section or a chapter on its own. Now then, we must also know the materials and methods, or rather the methodology that is being used in the study. How about the results, discussion, and conclusion? In some papers, the conclusion is incorporated in the discussion, while in others, it is being presented separately. Now, let us look at the title of the article. What do we have to look for? We will have to ask ourselves, while we are conducting the critical appraisal, questions like, does it indicate the topic and focus of the study? Does it indicate the research question? Is the title meaningful and complete? Does it reflect the aims and objectives of the study? Does it include the important variables which are intended to be measured? Does it give an idea of study population and study setting? Does it give an idea about the design of the study? Does the title look catchy? Is it very long or over long? Is the title too general or specific, or over specifics relate to the subject matter? Now, this may seem a mouthful, so you must be wondering what is considered a suitable title of the article. I'll give you one example. The title of the article is Oral Health and Socio-Economic Status Among Children During Syrian Crisis, a cross-sectional study. Now, let us look at the title again. Do you think it is an appropriate title? Do you think the title presented answers all the questions that we mentioned earlier? It may seem long, or rather not, in my opinion, it is not too long, but if you look at the title again, it does answer most of the questions. So I would think the title presented here is a suitable and appropriate title. Now, what is an abstract? An abstract is a brief summary of the whole paper, and it usually appears at the head of the article. When reading the abstract, we should ask ourselves whether the abstract is informative or not. Whether it is structured. For example, some journals like the British Dental Journal, Community Dental Health, all requires a structured abstract. When reading a paper, simply reviewing the abstract is not indicated. You need to review the whole paper before we can put a hierarchy to the paper, whether it is of good quality or not. Now, what are keywords? Keywords are usually incorporated at the end of an abstract, or sometimes below the title. In listing the keywords, most important and specific words are chosen. And the advantage of having keywords is that it facilitates us in our research search from the literature database or through search engines. In conducting critical appraisal of an abstract, we are going to ask ourselves a few questions. Is it structured or unstructured? What do you mean by that? A structured abstract is an abstract that contains subheadings of all the sections in the study. For example, it is written background, containing the background of the study as well as the aims and objectives, methodology of the study, results, conclusion. An abstract is also considered to be structured even if the subheadings are not written, but the sections of the paper is being separated by paragraphs. An unstructured abstract would be an abstract that has only one paragraph, whereby the whole summary of the paper is written in one whole paragraph. Question that we ask next would be, is the abstract informative, indicative, or a combination of informative and indicative? Is it comprehensive in its contents? Is it short, long, or overlong? In other words, is it giving the gist of the whole text? And when we read the abstract, does it match with what is present in detailed text? A good abstract would tell us the summary or a brief account of the whole paper. What is introduction then? Introduction acts to set the scene for the paper. The background provides context of the study, and the foreground reveals the specific research questions and research hypotheses. In general, we are going to look for balance and justification. A good introduction would have the background as well as the foreground. In conducting critical appraisal of introduction, what questions should we ask? Number one would be, is the introduction meaningful and concise and built on existing literature? Are the citations relevant? Are there any key authors mentioned? And are these citations following the correct references in the list of references at the end of the article? Has it presented the need for the study? Can you find the aims and objectives? And if you do find them, is it clearly stated? Is it logical and relevant? And does it have a research hypothesis included at the end of the introduction? Now, the brain section of a paper is its methodology, which refers to an active area of the operation of the study and is regarded to be the most important section of the paper. It should give us a clear and correct information about sampling, study design, the method of analysis, methods of measurement, and whether ethical guidelines were being followed or not. And a good methodology would be an account in which we have sufficient information should we want to repeat the study. Now, the context of the study is concerned with two issues: study setting, study population, sample design, how was the sample selected, is the sample size sufficient, and what is the method of measurement being used. Now, just to recap, there are the types of study design that we should know. Basically, there are two main types, which are experimental studies and observational studies. Now, under experimental studies, or intervention studies sometimes they are called, we have the randomized controlled trials and the non-randomized controlled trials. Whereas under observational studies, we have studies like cohort studies, case control studies, cross-sectional studies, ecological studies. Now, these are just some examples of study design. Okay, in doing critical appraisal related to methodology, it is about the what and how of the study. We need to see whether the methodology presented by the author is logical. Is it clear and meaningful? And as I have mentioned earlier, is it replicable? Is it appropriate to the aims and objectives of the study? Has the author mentioned the design of the study explicitly? On whom was the study done? How were the subjects selected? Has the study setting been mentioned by the authors? We need to also look out for the target population, the sampling frame, and the study population. Are they all clearly defined? Were the subjects studied in real-life circumstances? Was the study design sensible? And was bias avoided or minimized? All this should be mentioned by the author. Now, in summary, basically, appraisal of a methodology will include sample design, sample size, the type of study, the study design, methods of measurement, and appropriate analysis. In the results section, the researcher or author describes the specific findings and actual outcomes of the study, and this should relate directly to the aims and the methodology. Findings should be reported clearly and descriptively, but at this stage, it should not be interpreted. Tables, charts, and graphs are to be used appropriately, and there should not be any duplication in the graphic presentation. How do we then critically appraise results? We must ask the following questions. Are the results presented in a logical and comprehensive manner? Are important results presented in tables and text manner? Are tables, charts, and graphs numbered properly? Are there tables showing descriptive as well as inferential data? Wherever required, are there notes below the tables? In this case, we must be on the lookout whether the notes below the tables are very long and actually interpretation being done on the results here. Are the tables simple and alignment of information properly done? Now, let us understand what is discussion as a section in the paper. Discussion forms the heart of an article. It is majorly about interpreting and explaining the results. So, in the discussion, it is the section whereby authors can explain the results or the findings of the study as well as make interpretations out of it. There should be a comparison of the study findings with those of previous researchers. And if found to be in disagreement, the author should attempt to provide reasons for the disagreement. In this section, there is also an explanation on the problems and limitations of the study, and sometimes may end with conclusion. Now, when we critically appraise the discussion section, the questions that we should ask would be, is the discussion meaningful? Does it highlight the important findings of the study, which could be then the strength of the study? Is there enough explanation of all significant findings? Have the authors compared the current findings with that of the ones already reported in the literature? Is the comparison logical and reasoned properly? And did the author explain the weakness of the study? How about the implication of the study with respect to research field, practice, other populations, and general population? Were they being discussed in this section? Now, the conclusion. The conclusion is often drawn from the study, and it should be supported by the data collection and the results. So it is important to arrive as our own conclusions after critically reading the paper, irrespective of the author's conclusion. The reasoning proposed by the author in reaching conclusion should be rigorously analyzed and assessed for its strength. And conclusion should be founded on the discussion and results. It should only derive from the study and not what the author believes. And it should be based on empirical data derived from the study. So, in conducting critical appraisal of conclusion, the questions that we may ask would be, is the conclusion meaningful? Is it supported by the data collected and the results drawn? Is it based on the aims and objectives of the study? and it's just not what the author wants to believe? In other words, can the conclusion be believed? How about references? References are not an additional appendage, nor is it an extra baggage. It is in fact an integral part of the text. References provide an opportunity to the reader to pursue further reading and enable more learning. The reader can search the source so that he or she can verify and follow up what is asserted. Now, how do we critically appraise references? These are the questions that we may ask. Are there references for every citation done in the text, tables, legends, etc. of the article? We look out for it. How many second references are present? Are the references accurate? And which style are being used? Is it Vancouver style or is it Harvard style? Are there enough references to recent publications, or are the references only coming from the old publications? Are there key authors to the topic in question? It is an advantage if we can identify key authors to the topic in question. Okay, the other considerations when we are doing critical appraisal would be the title. Now, is the title too long or too short? Does it relate to subject matter? And most importantly, does it reflect the aims and objectives of the study? A good title is neither too long nor too short, but it relates very closely to the subject matter and it indicates the research question. If you remember, at the beginning of the lecture, we mentioned that critical evaluation is the process of validating or devalidating a study, and that critical evaluation consists of two steps. Step 1 is critical appraisal. Step 2 is critical reflection. We also agree that critical appraisal examines the internal validity of a study, while critical reflection examines the external validity of the study. Now, in doing critical appraisal of a study, we may find it to be highly internally valid, which means to say that it is of high quality. But evaluation will ask, so what? More importantly, can the results and conclusions be extrapolated to other populations and other contexts? Now, this is what we know as generalizability. Can the results and conclusion be generalized to other populations? Now, can the conclusions be applied to routine practice? Now, this is looking at the clinical practice significance of the study. How about the public health significance? Can the conclusion or the results of the study be utilized to population at large? How significantly can it change our concepts, ideas, and nature of practice? Now, this is known as concept tilting. What about its implications at economical level? Is it cost-benefit? Economic viability? Is it there? And is it cost-effective? All that I have mentioned is being represented in this simple diagram. Please make an attempt to study the diagram, understand it, and try to explain the diagram. Which brings us to the end of our lecture. For your information, in this course, you are required to conduct 2 critical appraisals as a group work. You are to select articles, and once they are approved, you will conduct critical appraisal of the articles using a template that I will be giving to you. Now, should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask me. Bye-bye.